This is my full Pokemon Home living dex, complete with gender differences, form changes, and other regional variants. For the past year and a half, I've been going through and revamping this living dex by catching every Pokemon in the oldest generation of games they appear in, while catching them all in Pokeballs only. If you want to attempt your own living dex and follow along the same way I am, I have a full living dex guide spreadsheet linked in the description. It lists every boxable Pokemon, form, gender difference, and regional variant, along with showing some of the optional Pokemon for the hardcore completionists. It also shows the earliest game each Pokemon can be caught in, and showing more detail on how to potentially obtain some of the more obscure Pokemon. I also updated it to include Pokemon that can Gigantamax if you want to give your Pokemon the Gigantamax factor, as I've been doing that throughout the series and will be doing a lot of it in this video. This episode is Generation 8, and just like with Generation 6 and 7, there's unfortunately no sort of DNS exploits you can do to get the old event Pokemon like you can do with Generations 4 and 5. There are probably some third-party hardware or software ways that you can get these old events, but for this series, I've been keeping it to only stuff you can do in-game. So instead, I'll just be counting the event Pokemon that I've already had for my living dex and explaining how I got them. So this is my event Zarude. The way it was originally supposed to be given out was you signed up for the Pokemon Trainer Club newsletter or something like that. And I did the thing, I signed up for it, I double checked to make sure I signed up for it, and then at a certain point they were supposed to email you a code for the Zarude, and unfortunately they kind of dropped the ball on it. A lot of people, including myself, just never got that email, but eventually later on someone had an extra code that they were able to give me. Not the most proud moment that I've had, but they wanted to sell me the code for $5, and normally I'm like, I really do not condone paying for digital creatures like this, because most of the time they are hacked, but this was an actual legitimate code that I was able to type in and get the Zarude, so it was a little weird that I had to pay $5 for it, but at the end of the day, I would not have been able to get this legit event Zarude if I didn't do that, because not too many people were able to get this one just because no one really received the emails for the Zarude code. The next one I got is the Dada Zarude, which this was the movie promo tie-in. I think the way this one worked is if you went to see the movie in theaters, you got a code with your ticket. Unfortunately, I don't think I had any showings for this near me, and I don't even, it might have been Japan only. I don't think it was Japan only. I think it was just any movie theater that was showing the movie, which unfortunately I didn't have any near me that were doing that. But eventually, I was in a live stream, and this is one of the luckiest things that I've ever had happen to me. I was watching someone live stream on Twitch, and randomly in their chat, someone was just like, I want to do Pokemon trivia. And they were asking, the question was, what was the first ever Pokemon? And I quickly responded it was Rhydon, because for those who don't know, Rhydon was the first designed Pokemon in the series. Obviously, there's that meme of like, what's the first Pokemon? Is it Bulbasaur? Is it Rhydon? Is it Mew? Is it Arceus? The reality is that Rhydon was the first ever designed Pokemon. I guess technically speaking, Diglett was, because I believe the creator of Pokemon said they would doodle Diglett when they were a kid, so Diglett was kind of predating Pokemon entirely. Officially, the first Pokemon was Rhydon, so I put Rhydon in the chat, and they were like, congrats, you won! Here's a code for the Dada Zarude. And I was like, wait, really? And they actually just gave me a code for the Dada Zarude because they had extras, which is so lucky, because I don't even remember what streamer it was, so apologies for not shouting you out, but it was just some streamer I was watching who was like shiny hunting or something. And it was just a crazy coincidence that I was in their stream at the same time this person wanted to do trivia. I got the question correct first, and they just gave me a code for this Zarude. So this one's actually like really crazy that I have this one. And yeah, a little more proud of this one than the first one. But at the end of the day, they're both fully legitimate. I did enter the codes myself. So here are the two Zarudes, and I believe those are the only event Pokemon from Generation 8. So let's continue with the living dex. If you saw my Generation 1 Living Dex video, you know that I caught extras of Pokemon that evolved in later generations, just for Generation 1 though. So in this case, I caught an extra Scyther that I will be evolving into Kleavor later on in this video. And if you've been watching this series from the beginning or are new to the series, please consider leaving a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. I only have one generation left after this, but I still have tons of plans for really cool videos moving forward. Starting off this generation, I needed to do some setup, but first I had to finish playing through the main story, so I caught myself Eternatus. Now this is a scripted catch, so you can catch it in any Pokeball and it is guaranteed to be caught, and I decided to catch it in a regular Pokeball, obviously. Going back to the setup, I needed to gather all the items I needed for all the alchemy. For those who don't know, alchemy has 63 different forms, and you need all of the different suites in order to evolve Milcery into one of each of those forms. The best way to get the suites is to go to these cafes. There's one in Motostoke, one in Hammerlock, and one in Winden, and once a day you can battle the cafe master and he'll give you a random food item, and a lot of the times it is a sweet. It sometimes isn't, but you can just do the time skip exploit, which if you don't know how to do that, there's probably a tutorial online for that. It's really simple, but you can just date skip over and over again in order to keep battling him over and over again and get enough sweets. A lot of the times you'll get strawberry sweets, you'll get some of the other sweets, but unfortunately you cannot get the star or ribbon sweets from this guy. It has to be one of the other sweets, and the sweets you get is dependent on the location. But all three locations give you a chance at a strawberry sweet, and honestly all you need is the numbers. You don't necessarily need each individual sweet because we can turn them into the other sweets later on. The other way to get sweets is to go to the Snowslide Slope in the Crown Tundra, where there is a Watt Trader who gives you a special once a day, and it can be one of the sweets. It also has a chance to be the star or ribbon sweet, so it's a good way to get some of those sweets, but it is once a day, so you have to do the date skip exploit in order to get more chances at sweets. And honestly, there's a lot of items he can give you, so there's a good chance you won't be getting too many sweets from him, but it is still an option. After you get enough sweets for all 63 alchemy, you can re-roll a lot of the strawberry sweets into different sweets using the Cram-O-Matic. If you know how the Cram-O-Matic works, there's a system where items you put in have a specific type and value, and depending on what the first item you put into the mix is, that will determine the type. You want a fairy type item, which in this case strawberry sweets are fairy type items, and then you want to fill it up with high enough value items that will hit a range that will give you either the first set of sweets or the set of sweets that includes the ribbon and star sweet. In my opinion, it's easier to get the ribbon and star sweets from this because all you need to do is put in a strawberry sweet and then 3 Armorite ores, and if you are doing a lot of raids, which believe me, we will be doing a lot of raids in this video, you'll be getting a lot of Armorite ore and you can spend it pretty easily on this. And if you don't get a star or ribbon sweet, you'll still get a strawberry sweet in return at the very least, so you can just put it right back in and try again over and over again until you get enough of the sweets you need. If you want to get the other sweets instead of the star or ribbon sweets, you'll just want to use different items. In this case, we're going to still lead with the strawberry sweet. I'm going to use 2 Armorite ore this time, and in order to not go over the number we need, we're going to be using either big nuggets or big pearls. Those are pretty decently common items you can get in order to re-roll this for the other sweets, but I will leave the recording on screen of all the item values and types along with all of the recipes you can use for the Cram-O-Matic if you want to figure out your own recipes yourself if you don't have access to these items. But these should be pretty accessible items you can use to reroll all of the sweets into the ones you need. I then needed to take to the Isle of Armor, which I guess we were already on the Isle of Armor for the Cram-O-Matic, but I needed to take the Isle of Armor to get max mushrooms. Now, we need a ton of max mushrooms for all of the alchemy. We do want to Gigantamax every Pokemon that is capable of Gigantamaxing for this Living Dex. It's not necessarily required, but I have been doing it throughout the series, and this generation is no exception. But luckily for us, there's a lot of Pokemon we can already catch as their Gigantamax forms without needing to use Max Soup on them. Unfortunately, we will still need to Gigantamax pretty much all of the alchemy forms along with the Galar starters. Other than that, you should be fine catching the other Gigantamax Pokemon in raids. So while I was going around doing the raids on the Isle of Armor for the max mushrooms, we found some Gigantamax Pokemon that we were able to catch, including this Amped Toxtricity, Colossal, the low-key form of Toxtricity, Electricity, Orbeetle, Caparaja, and also I will say while we're doing these raids, it's normally pretty hard to catch these raid bosses, especially in a Pokeball, but if you do host a raid and invite someone else, it's actually significantly easier to catch them. It's not guaranteed. There's some sources that say it's just guaranteed to catch them. That's false. We still had some breakout, but it is so much easier to catch them. I only failed a handful of them, and luckily we saved in front of the raids and just rebattled them, so we were able to catch them all pretty easily. After Caparaja, we found Gigantamax Duraludon. Then we got Sandaconda. Then we managed to find Gigantamax Flapple. Then Dreadnought, Grimmsnarl, Corviknight, and one of the Alchemy. Now, Alchemy you can find as a Gigantamax form in raids, but it is only one of the forms. It is the Vanilla Cream with the Strawberry Sweets. That is the only form you can get as a Gigantamax from the raids. So, thankfully, we have to get slightly less Max Mushrooms for all the Alchemy, but we still have to Gigantamax every other Alchemy with the Max Mushrooms. Taking a quick break, I wanted to start going for the Kubfu and Urshifus, so I needed to finish playing the post-game story, and in this case, we needed to catch Zacian. Now, Zacian, like most other box art legendaries, was actually very easy to catch. And to explain a little bit about Kubfu, you essentially need 3 of them, 2 for each of the Urshifu forms, plus 1 extra to keep as Kubfu, so I needed to start a new save file in order to catch the one we were to keep as Kubfu. And while I was playing through the story, something crazy happened. Switch 2 being backwards compatible would be a huge W. Yeah, it'd be really nice. But I'm not gonna sit here and be like, guys, it's confirmed, get ready, because hasn't been confirmed, so who knows. Makes sense that it makes sense that it would be backwards compatible considering it's still named the Switch. It's not. Oh my gosh! Shiny Yamper! Oh my gosh! Oh, I thought that looked like a shiny at first. We did it, guys! We got a random shiny on our Living Dex challenge. It finally happened. Oh my gosh. And at least I have 27 Pokeballs for this thing. Oh my gosh, dude. That's insane. I didn't think it was gonna happen. We went through 7 generations of Pokemon. Playing through so many save files. Catching so many Pokemon, so many forms, finding so many 1%s. We didn't find any shinies. I didn't think it was gonna happen, and we got it in Generation 8, a shiny Yamper. I can't believe I found a random shiny on this random playthrough that I'm just trying to get. This playthrough, by the way, I'm only trying to get a single Kubfu and to test something with Max Mushrooms. This was not like anything we were gonna do that's crazy. I cannot believe that just happened. This was first encounter too. Yeah, it wasn't the first encounter of the game, but it was the first Yamper we've seen since doing this. Yeah, this is full odds. You can't even get the shiny charm until you're at Sirchester. We literally only have our starter, which we sent to a different save file to level it up, and then we have a Squovet. And we haven't even done the first gym yet. Like, we just got the endorsement from Leon. Let's try to catch it. And it's easy. I would have never thought. That's so funny too, because I saw that it was like pink, and obviously I know shiny Yamper is pink, but like it just was something that was not even in the realm of possibilities in my mind. Like, it was just, I was so not thinking in any way we were gonna find a shiny that I saw it was pink, and it just completely, like, I didn't even think anything of it. What if it has a mark, too? I don't have Mark Charm. It doesn't have a mark. Jolly! Can't imagine that's good for it. Actually, you know, that doesn't seem too bad. The attack seems decently high. Is Boltund a physical attacker or a special attacker? I'll probably keep it as a Yamper anyway. Alright, we got a regular Yamper, our second Yamper encounter, by the way. And our first Yamper encounter, the shiny Yamper. Maybe we should nickname it something along the lines of the Living Dex. Because this was the shiny we found during our entire Living Dex challenge. Origin, or a name to link the challenge. Origin would be a cool name. I think I'm going to go with Origin. I think that's a cool name, just to go with the whole Living Dex thing, because, I mean, if you guys have been following this Living Dex challenge the entire time, I have been wanting to find a random shiny the entire time. I played through Emerald 4 times. I played through Ruby and Sapphire. I think Ruby at least once. I played through Platinum once. I think I played through Pearl once. I played through X and Y 4 times. I played through Sun and Moon a few times. Like, we played through so many games. Gold, Silver, Crystal. We played through so many games. We did a ton of encounters trying to find every Pokemon, and I never found a shiny. Meanwhile, like, everyone who's been, like, following along with the challenge that I've seen has been, like, telling me they've been finding random shinies, like, multiple random shinies, and I was like, I can't believe we haven't found a random shiny. So, like, the fact that it actually happened is so crazy. Especially because I'm live streaming it. Like, I usually play through Pokemon games off stream, too. So, like, I wouldn't have gotten this live if I wasn't streaming it. So I think I'm going to name it Origin, because it's like our Origin Dex challenge. My shiny luck's been turning around, man. Let me tell ya. Whoops. Imagine this one was shiny, too. We got a regular Choodle and Origin, the shiny Yamper. Oh my gosh. Dude, I can't get away. The fact that I noticed it was pink too, and it just didn't click with me at all, because I was so not thinking it would ever happen. That's so crazy. After getting my one and only shiny of this entire Living Dex challenge so far, I finally continued on to getting Cubfu, and after completing the 3 trials on the Isle of Armor, we got ourselves our first Cubfu. But now we need to go back to Max Mushrooms. Now, I wanted to make this part of the video to explain Max Mushrooms, as there's a lot of uncertainty about how to spawn Max Mushrooms on the Isle of Armor. It's not necessarily misinformation, it's more just not enough information on it, so I decided to do my own research and share what I found on how to spawn Max Mushrooms. You need to complete 3 raids on the Isle of Armor as the minimum to spawn a Max Mushroom. A lot of people believed that 3 was essentially the max, like you just did 3 raids and then every time you completed a 3rd raid, a Max Mushroom would spawn. That's not the case. It is sometimes you complete 3 raids, sometimes you complete 4, sometimes you complete 5, and I think maybe 6. I'm not actually sure about 6, but essentially you need to complete 3 to 5 raids. It might be 6. I wasn't really able to figure out if 6 was the max for a Max Mushroom to spawn. It would have taken me way too long to figure that out. I don't have access to like bots or anything that would like run that for me and tell me the numbers. So it would have just been me checking every single spawn point for a Max Mushroom after every raid and doing that over and over again for the slight chance that maybe there would not be one spawning in until after 6 raids, but that just not a really realistic thing for me to figure out. But I'm more confident in 3 to 5 raids anyway, because a lot of the Max Mushrooms you do get are after 3 to 4. It's very rare, it seems, that you get them after 5, but it's pretty common you don't always get them after 3. So that's one thing I figured out. Another thing I discovered was how many Max Mushrooms you can get at a time on the Isle of Armor. It was originally believed to be 6, and I believe the only source of that is Austin John plays. I think he has a video on max mushroom farming, and in his video he states that the max amount of mushrooms you can have at once is 6 on the island. Unfortunately, that's just not true. I did way more than enough raids it would have taken in order to spawn 7, so I even went above and beyond and just did a bunch of raids, and the max I was only able to find on the island at once was 5. So the max you can get is only 5, so my recommendation would be to complete 15 raids each time before checking. Don't do more than that, just so that you don't overflow the amount of mushrooms you have, because you only cap at 5. While you're defeating the raids, you do not need to Dynamax or Gigantamax during the battle for it to count towards the max mushroom spawn. Simply just completing a raid counts. Completing the same raid over and over again via an invite from someone who keeps soft resetting their game after the raid is completed, then resending the invite, counts towards the mushroom spawn. So the most effective way to farm max mushrooms is if you have a second switch, or I guess a friend who would be willing to do this with you, is to have a save file that's barely played through so that you only get tier 1 raids, the 1-star raids, as those raids don't get shields to show up and you can one-shot them every single time. Have that save file saved in front of a level 1 raid and then invite yourself to that raid, join it, complete the raid in one shot, and then after you complete the raid, have the game that is saved in front of the raid just soft reset and then invite to the raid again once the game reloads. You can just do this over and over again, and you don't have to worry about the shields and how many turns it takes. You don't have to worry about Dynamaxing or Gigantamaxing, which adds to the time of the raid. This makes for the most efficient way to farm raids. Unfortunately, if you don't have a second switch or just aren't capable of doing this, the next best thing would be to just ride around the Isle of Armor and complete every raid you see over and over again. And unfortunately, it's not super quick, but there's not really too much more you can do about that outside of having a friend who's willing to just do a raid over and over again without getting any rewards from it. So that's the reality of it. That's probably the most effective way to do the raid. In this clip, I am doing an Igglybuff raid over and over again that I've been inviting to myself from a second switch. So I did that over and over again until I hit enough raids, and then I would check all of the mushrooms and then rinse and repeat. No matter what, it's gonna be a tedious process. There are 63 alchemy, meaning you would need a minimum of 189 max mushrooms. You can get one of the Gigantamax alchemy from raids, but you still need the starters to Gigantamax anyway, so you need like a little more. I think it's like 195 or something is the amount of max mushrooms you need to Gigantamax everything. So yeah, it's pretty tedious. I did this, it took me like 5-ish days to do all of it, and that's not even including like shinies or anything. So yeah, it's quite the grind. The only other way to get max mushrooms is through that Watt trader that I mentioned earlier who can sell you the sweets. He can give you max mushrooms, but unfortunately, unlike the sweets, they're a lot more rare, and it's just not an efficient method at all. Like, it's fine if you're going for another item and you happen to stumble upon max mushrooms, but I would not recommend using him as the main source of farming max mushrooms. You're just not going to get enough in a short period of time. You're going to get way more by just doing raids on the Isle of Armor. One more thing I want to make note of is that a lot of people seem to believe that after a certain amount of time has passed, a max mushroom will just spawn randomly on the Isle of Armor. I couldn't find any evidence to support this. I did so many tests. I waited days and days and days, and I kept checking the Isle of Armor on multiple save files. Unless it's a really rare chance of happening, I'm willing to bet it just isn't possible, because I wasn't able to find any max mushrooms ever since I was checking it, and I had been checking it throughout the entirety of completing this living dex, and it just never happened. Once I finished completing raids, I just wasn't getting any more. So you pretty much have to complete raids in order to get max mushrooms to spawn on the Isle of Armor. Now, while you're completing the story of the Isle of Armor, you do get a guaranteed cluster of 3 max mushrooms, but we are going to use those anyway for the 2 Urshifu forms, so we're not going to count those as the total you need, as those are pretty much like a guaranteed thing, and we're going to use them anyway. But that's all of the information I think I have on max mushrooms. Again, it's a lot of information, and there was so much uncertainty about it. If you have any questions about max mushrooms, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I will hopefully be able to answer your questions on them. Again, it is quite the grind to get everything Gigantamaxed in this game. Even if you catch all of the other ones from max raid battles, you still have to get a lot just because of alchemy. So no matter what, it's a very tedious process. After all that, let's continue on the living dex. Continuing on to my shield version, I wanted to finish playing through the post-game story. 1, in order to catch Zamazenta, but 2, also, you need to completely finish the post-game story in order to actually Gigantamax the Urshifu forms. So I wanted to set up both the sword and shield copies in order to get those Urshifus Gigantamaxed. You don't need to play through the full story in order to get Urshifu, but if you want to Gigantamax them, as in my opinion it makes it a little more complete of a living dex, then you're going to want to catch your legendary dog from your version. And also battle Hop in Slumbering Weald at the end after he catches the other legendary dog. But after completing the 3 trials on the Isle of Armor, we got our second Cubfu, and then we completed the Darkness Tower in order to get the single strike Urshifu. Because we completed the post-game story, we get this little quest with Hop in order to find max honey in order to Gigantamax our Urshifu, so we went and did that. And then I wanted to catch the legendaries of the Crown Tundra. Unfortunately, in order to catch either Regidrago or Regieleki, you need to catch the first 3 Regis in the Crown Tundra. Now, you only need to have 3 Regis in your party in order to unlock the temple to get either Regidrago or Regieleki. It doesn't have to specifically be these ones. However, you do still have to catch these ones regardless in order to allow that temple to open. So you can catch these 3 and then use a different set of 3 to unlock the door, but you still have to catch these ones regardless. So we had to catch all 3 of the Regis on the Crown Tundra. I didn't do anything crazy. We didn't need to catch these in Pokeballs. We caught those in Generation 3, so we just caught them all in Timer Balls, I believe. So we caught the Registeel, then the Regirock, and then Regice. And after catching all of those, we did the pattern on the floor that gave us Regieleki. And this one we did have to catch in a Pokeball, as this one is for the living dex. After catching Regieleki, I needed to complete the Calyrex storyline, and this one we needed to pick what horse we wanted to get. In this case, I wanted to get Glastrier. Now, in order to pick what horse you get, it just gives you 2 options between a snow farm and like a cemetery farm, and I chose Glastrier first, so I decided to put it in the snow farm. So after getting the ice root carrots, we were then able to complete the story and then catch Calyrex and Glastrier as a 2-in-1, which is pretty crazy. Unfortunately, this was a really hard battle to catch the legendary, as it's an unboosted legendary catch rate, and the moveset it has is pretty obnoxious. So my strategy was to just go in with a Gallade with False Swipe and Hypnosis, holding a wide lens so that Hypnosis hit more accurately, and then also use a bunch of X attacks, X defense, and X special defense in order to make it so my Gallade just wouldn't die and would also do a lot more damage, as this thing gets Iron Defense, which raises its defense stat by 2 stages each time, and it was just really hard to catch. But eventually we did catch it in a Pokeball, and that gives us both Calyrex and Glastrier. This is the one time you're able to catch 1 Pokemon and get 2 out of it, outside of, I guess, technically Shedinja. But this is the first time we catch a Pokemon and just automatically have 2 because of it. After catching the Ice Rider Calyrex, I needed to continue playing through the DLC on my other save file, so in this case we got our 3rd and final Cubfu. I did the Water Tower this time and got our Cubfu to evolve into Urshifu, and after completing that other side quest with Hop, we were able to Gigantamax that Urshifu. I caught the 3 Regis in the Crown Tundra again, but I decided not to show it this time as it's not important. We just needed them to unlock Regidrago. Then continuing with the Calyrex story on my other save file, I went to the old cemetery this time to plant the roots in that plot of land in order to get the Shade Root Carrot. This will allow us to get Spectrier. Is it Spectrier or Spectrier? I'm actually not sure about that. But then we went to catch the Shadow Rider Calyrex, and this battle was significantly easier than the Ice Rider Calyrex, I will say. But unfortunately, we catch 2 Pokemon again, and we really only needed Spectrier, so we just have an extra Calyrex, I guess. I then wanted to get the remaining Gigantamax Pokemon from raids, so I reset for a Gigantamax Appleton raid in Shield version, as it's a Shield exclusive. I did the same thing for a Gigantamax Centiskorch and a Gigantamax Hatterene. At this point, I needed to catch the remaining shield exclusives, so I found a Galarian Corsola in the wild area because it was cloudy weather. I should also point out that I don't know the name of every single area and every single route in these games, so a lot of times I'll just use directions. Unfortunately, with the wild area, I don't really know how to describe these places in directions, but you can always use encyclopedias like Bulbapedia or Cerebi to figure out where these Pokemon appear in. That's what I do for those who are wondering. But in this case, we just went to the wild area during cloudy weather and found a Galarian Corsola. I then made my way to Glimwood Tangle to find the female Indeedee. Now, the male and female Indeedee aren't necessarily version exclusives, as you can breed for either gender on either version, but in order to find them wild, they are version exclusives. So because I was just in Shield version, I decided to catch a wild Indeedee in Glimwood Tangle. I then went to the water and iceberg area, again, don't remember what this place is called, in the Crown Tundra in order to find Ice-Q, because Ice-Q is very rare in mainland Galar. So at this point, I wanted to go route to route, catching every Pokemon that we needed on my sword copy. So we started with, I believe, Route 1, and this was where we caught Squovet and Wooloo. And I should point out, if you're wondering why there's a face cam all of a sudden, and why there has been, like, sporadically throughout the series, is that I have been streaming most of these on my Twitch channel. So if you want to see me completing the Generation 9 Living Dex Challenge live, the final Living Dex Challenge, make sure you follow me on Twitch. I have my channel linked in the description of all my videos. After catching Wooloo, I found myself a Rookidee, and then I went to Slumbering Wheel to find a Blipbug. Then we went to Route 2 in order to find a Choodle, a Nickit, and a Yamper. Unfortunately, this one wasn't shiny. Then I went to Route 3 in order to find Gossifleur, and in the random grass encounters, we were able to find a Sizzlipede. Now, Sizzlipede's pretty rare in the grass, but I just led with a Pokemon with the ability Flash Fire, and it made it a lot more common. After that patch of grass, we found this static Corvisquire that's on this rock. Fun fact about this Corvisquire, you can respawn it over and over again and catch as many as you want, but they are shiny locked for some reason, but I figured it was right there and we should just catch it anyway. After catching Corvisquire, we went to the next patch of grass and found a Roly-Poly. I then went to the Galar Mine and found a Carkol. I then went to the route with the daycare in order to find a Galarian Farfetch'd. And in the random grass, I found an Applin. I then went to the route to the left of Hammerlock in order to find a Galarian Yamask. And after passing through Stow-on-Side, I went back to Glimwood Tangle in order to find all of the Glimwood Tangle Pokemon. First up, we found the Impidimp on the mushroom right there. Then we did random encounters and found Morgrem, our first Sinistea, which this one was a phony. We found Hetrem. We found a second Sinistea, which unfortunately this one was also phony, but we do need the phony Sinistea, so we'll still take it. Then we found the male Indeedee, and at this point I wanted to get the antique Sinestees. Now, the antique Sinistea is normally a 1%, but if you do the curry encounters, it actually raises it to about a 13% from curry encounters. Now, there's a whole thing about curry encounters that you should probably know before attempting this, with like there's this whole thing about sociability values and type of grade of curry, so I'm not going to be explaining that in this video. I might make a future video explaining curry, as I do want to attempt a shiny hunt with curry in the future, so we're gonna be doing that, and I'll probably make a tutorial on that. There's other tutorials online for it, but in this case I just did curry over and over and over again until a Sinistea showed up. Unfortunately, I got pretty unlucky, as the antique Sinistea is more common than the phony one, and it still took me like a handful of Sinestees in order to find the antique one, but we finally found our first antique Sinistea, and then the next day I ended up finding a second antique Sinistea. Now, I could have just been doing random encounters. There's easier ways to find antique Sinistea if you have the Crown Tundra, whatnot, but I figured it'd been cool to catch Sinistea in Glimwood Tangle where it originated from, and also they are guaranteed to get the curry mark, so both my antique Sinistea and Poltegeist for my Living Dex are gonna have the curry mark, which is pretty cool, and Sinistea is one of my all-time favorite Pokemon, so I figured I'd do something a little more special for it. I then went to the route to the right of Motostoke in order to find a Hatenna in the overworld encounters. Then I went to Professor Magnolia's house and went into the water to find both Arrokuda and Barraskewda. I then went to the route to the left of Spikemuth in order to get a Clobbopus, and then I was able to catch a Graplock on the route directly above it. I then went to the route to the right of Hammerlock in order to find a Thievul and a Berserker. Right above that, I went to the area with all of the little ladders and stuff and found a Phalanx. I then went to the snow route above that in order to find Snom, and then I made my way into the path to the peak in the Crown Tundra in order to find Frostmoth. At this point, I wanted to catch all of the remaining Alchemy, so we needed to catch 63 more Milcery, as we already caught one of the Alchemy. There's 63 forms, and then we needed one extra for Milcery. And this is the last Milcery. I just didn't like the idea of like every single Pokemon I caught in my living dex was like in a Quick Ball or Dusk Ball or Repeat Ball. I like the consistency of the Pokeball. Also, it's just like an added challenge. We did it. We caught all of the Milcery. I then went to the Dusty Bowl during cloudy weather in order to find Eldegoss. I then went to Rolling Fields, and if you beat the champion, you do get this guaranteed Wanderer Dubwool, so that's how we got Dubwool. I then did some more in-grass encounters by the daycare in order to get a Dottler. I then went to North Lake Millick in order to find a Bolton. Just like the Dubwool, after you beat the champion, there's just a guaranteed Wanderer one here, no matter what weather it is, so that's how we got Boltoned. I then did some random grass encounters in the route where we caught Yamask in order to catch a Silicobra. I then went to Challenge Beach on the Isle of Armor in order to find a Cramorant, and conveniently right next to the Cramorant was a Morpeko. I then vaguely remember getting a Toxel from the daycare lady, so I went there and got a gift Toxel. Unfortunately, we found out later on that is caught in a luxury ball, so we can't count that towards our living dex. So instead, I went back to the route where I caught Thievul and Berserker and did some random grass encounters in order to properly add Toxel to our living dex. I then went to Bridgefield as I remembered finding a Wanderer Obstagoon there often, so I decided to go there. And luckily, it was the correct weather for Obstagoon to appear, and we caught Obstagoon. I then needed to get Cufant, and unfortunately, it wasn't the correct weather, so I went to the Crown Tundra, and on my way there, I found a Stonjourner. Then, shortly after, I found Cufant. Then I went to the Old Cemetery in order to find a Wanderer Dragapult, and after catching Dragapult in the overworld encounters in Old Cemetery, you can also find Dracloak. Then I went to the Lake of Outrage, and in grass during foggy weather, we found a Dreepy. I then went to Route 9 and did some in-grass encounters to find Pincurchin, and then I decided to get all of the fossils. Now, you can get every fossil in each version. They're not necessarily version exclusives, but 2 fossils are common and 2 fossils are rare for each version. And unfortunately, the common fossils for your version only give you enough for 1 of the 4. So we just got the fossils commonly on both versions and then traded the 2 we needed over to the main save file and then just restored all 4 of them. So we got Dracozolt, we got Arctozolt, we got Dracovish, and Arctovish. I then needed to breed for the starters, so we hatched ourselves 3 Grookey, 3 Scorbunny, and 3 Sobble. I then realized I forgot to catch Greedent, so I went back to Bridgefield where these 3 berry trees are and found the Wanderer Greedent. And then I needed to go back to the Game Boy Color and catch Stantler in my silver version. Because Ursaring is exclusive to Gold and Crystal, we went to our Crystal version to catch Ursaring. And then I went to Diamond and caught Mime Jr. I then sent these Pokemon into bank along with the Scyther that we caught from our Generation 1 living dex that we had extra. And then I moved on to Legends Arceus. So I first went to the Cobalt Coastlands in order to find and catch Hisui and Quillfish, and I needed to catch both genders of the White Stripe Basculin. Now, in the main area of the Cobalt Coastlands where I'm at, you can only get one of the genders of the White Stripe Basculin. In this case, they're always going to be female, but if you travel to the far side all the way north to this island right here, all of the Basculins over here are going to be male. So we caught a male Basculin over here, and then I went to the Alabaster Icelands in order to catch a Hisui and Sneasel. In this case, we got the guaranteed alpha one because why not? And then I needed to catch a Namarus twice. Now, I already played through 2 save files of Legends Arceus in order to do this, and essentially, I was really worried about catching a Namarus in a Pokeball, but my strategy was to use a few stealth sprays and a bunch of smoke bombs and just chuck mud balls at a Namarus until I was able to throw my Pokemon at it. In this case, I had a Weirdeer that I used Tackle until it was in red HP and then Hypnosis to put it to sleep. And at that point, we just chucked Pokeballs, and thankfully, the strategy worked extremely well. The first time I tried to catch a Namarus when the game was new, I wanted to break my Switch in half, But this strategy made it so much easier, and then I did it on another save file and caught my second Enamorus, and now there's only one more Pokemon we need to catch. In Scarlet and Violet, if you have the Teal Mask DLC, you get a side quest in order to catch a Blood Moon Ursaluna. Now this Ursaluna is actually really easy to catch, you just have to defeat it and it's guaranteed to be caught after you defeat it, so obviously we just caught it in a Pokeball. And now I needed to do some evolutions. Now there's not a ton of evolutions we have to do this time because most of the Pokemon we caught fully evolved, but we evolved our Grookey into Thwackey and our Thwackey into Rillaboom, our Scorbunny into Raboot and Raboot into Cinderace, Sobble into Drizzile and Drizzile into Inteleon. We used the crackpot. We used the cracked pot on. I just now realized that it sounds like crackpot. What the heck? We used the cracked pot to evolve Phony Sinistea into Phony Poltegeist and the chipped pot to evolve Antique Sinistea into Antique Poltegeist. We then evolved Galarian Corsola into Cursula. We gave the leak to our Galarian Farfetch'd and then completed a battle while getting 3 critical hits in the battle in order to evolve it into Surfetch'd. We evolved Mime Jr. into Galarian Mr. Mime, and then Galarian Mr. Mime into Mr. Rhyme. We had our Galarian Yamask take at least 49 damage, and then went to this little arch in Dusty Bowl to evolve it into the Runerigus. Then we evolved all of our 62 extra Milcery into all the different alchemy forms, and yeah, I'm not gonna show all these evolutions. Just kidding. Next in Legends Arceus, we used the Razor Claw on our Hisui and Sneasel during the day to evolve it into Sneaseler. We used the Black Augurite on our Scyther to get Cleavor. And during a full moon, we used a Peat Block on our Ursaring to get Ursaluna. After taking a ton of recoil damage on our Basculins, we evolved both of them into the male and female Basculegion. For Stantler, we used Psyshield Bash in Agile style 20 times in order to get Weirdeer, and we used Barb Barrage in Strong style 20 times to get Hisui and Quillfish into Overquill. And last but not least, we needed to change one of our Enamorus into the Therian form. At this point, we needed to give the Gigantamax factor to all the remaining Pokemon, which in this case, it's just the starters and all of the other alchemy forms. And there we go, our Generation 8 Living Dex is complete. But there is one more thing I have to do. Now, if you've been following the series, you'll know that for Generation 7, there was one Pokemon that I didn't catch. This Pokemon was the original color Magearna. In order to get the original color Magearna, you need to have a Pokemon home account, and you need to register every single Pokemon into the Pokedex from Bulbasaur all the way to Eternatus. Now, it doesn't include the DLC, and it does not include Generation 9, it's just Bulbasaur to Eternatus, but it does include all the mythicals. So what we needed to do to complete this is start by creating a second Pokemon home account, which I just used one of my other Switch files that has a Nintendo login already, and then use that account to connect to a separate device, because you can only have one Pokemon home account on one device, as in like a mobile phone or a tablet or something like that. So I had to use a second phone in order to get Pokemon Home a second time. I then grabbed nearly every single Pokemon I could from my Living Dex that I've been working on this past year and a half and put them all into game save files in order to then just send them back into the second home account. And I did that painstakingly, really tediously, one box at a time, because I didn't want to pay for an extra home subscription and you only get one box. Registered every single Pokemon that I could have, except for the few Pokemon that aren't even available on the Switch as of now. So for those, I had to simply friend trade myself the last remaining Pokemon, which was Spinda, which unfortunately Spinda is on the Switch, but it is locked in purgatory in BDSP. There's the Patrat line, the Elemental Monkeys, and Furfrou. So I had to trade all those Pokemon over, and at this point we were able to get an original color Magearna. Now, I already had my own original color Magearna, but I did nickname it, and if you've been following the series, you know that this I want to have really consistent, and I didn't want to nickname any of the Pokemon in the Living Dex, so I needed to get another one for the reason of not being able to nickname it, because you can't change the nickname after you've nicknamed it, because you can only change nicknames in save files of games, and Pokemon Home is a different OT than any of your save files, so it just will refuse to let you change the nickname. So we had to get a second Pokeball, Magearna. One thing I will point out is that if you do this strategy that I did with 2 home accounts, most of you will probably just be able to get Magearna from your own home account and be okay with that, but because I nicknamed mine, I had to use a second home account. If you are using the free version of Home, be aware that when you put Pokemon in the box in Home, the single like 30 space box that you have as a free account, it will reorder some of them. Not only does it try to fill up the box as much as possible, and any empty space will just get like pushed over and they'll be not in the exact order they were in the Pokemon Home boxes, but also it will randomize the form order. I was noticing when I was putting them back that some of the genders were flipped in a different order, and some of the forms I had, like the Oricorios or the Miniors, were just not in the correct order that they normally were. So I had to go back and like reorder all my Pokemon that I put into this home account once I put them back into my main home account. So just keep that in mind. It's kind of a tedious process. It's very annoying. I don't know why it's like that. It's just a PC box. You should be able to put them in the PC box and have it save normally, but it's really weird like that. But yeah, we got our second original color Magearna, officially completing Generation 7. So there we have it, my Generation 8 Living Dex, fully completed. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Let me know if you're working on your own Living Dex and how far you in. Again, if you've been following the series since the beginning, make sure you leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. I got one more generation to go left, but even after Generation 9 is complete, I have tons of really cool video ideas to post on YouTube, so you're not going to want to miss that. But until then, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, ring those notification bells, all that good stuff. Be sure to join the domiNATION, and I will see you in the next video.